Welcome everybody again. So the first photographer we are going to present her work. Her name is Lauren Mitchell, present here. And through her love of line, shape, and color, Lauren Mitchell captures the aging sprawl of her everyday surroundings in the Sunshine State. She spends most of her time figuring out what it means to live in Florida. A lot of us do. To be in this beautiful, strange place where reality and illusion exist side by side. Though much of her work is vivid and bright, there's often an undercurrent of strangeness and darkness residing just below the surface. She would also like to add that she's continually inspired by her neighborhood, even for the reasons why she very much dislikes it. So Lauren,
yes,
welcome. Thank you very much. Alexis, go ahead and let's put Lauren's presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Mitchell. Thank you so much for being here today. It's very, very beautiful Saturday. Let me escape just a little bit so I can see everything on my screen. Okay, so I just a little bit more background. I grew up kind of moving all over the place. Anytime anyone asks me where I'm from, I say basically everywhere and nowhere. I went to college for design, graphic design, and art history. But along the way, I've never had any formal photography training, but it's always been something that's I've carried along with all along the way, you know, just being very interested in taking pictures and of everything that was going on in my life. I moved to Florida in 2008. And to be completely honest, it was the absolute last place on earth that I wanted to be. I had just graduated from college in San Diego, and after realizing I just could not afford to live there, which is starting to become true of everywhere, but especially Southern California at the time, I moved back to the East Coast and moved to Florida specifically to be with my husband, then boyfriend at the time. So to me, and I had moved to Brevard County, and this was right at the sort of beginning stages of the recession. And Brevard had already kind of been down on its luck over the years anyway. So I moved from space in Southern California to a place that, for one, I didn't want to be, and you know, a little bit further down on its luck, and it was a big shock. And it always sort of became this springboard for me for other places, and it was always this place that I could, you know, see myself being in temporarily until we could move somewhere better. But all along the years, those, you know, the years grew and grew, and I was still finding myself living here. And so a lot of times on lunch breaks, I would start to take photos of my surroundings. And these are some of the photos that I took, just quick phone photos, things that I found interesting, things that caught my eye at the time. So, you know, Titusville, Rockledge, Cocoa, and those places. Next. Oh, next.
Alexis.
Thank you. So again, just continuing to stop and take quick phone photos, not really thinking of it as a concrete project. I don't really approach photography, or I try to, and it's very hard for me to approach things in the project sense. It's most of the time something that sort of evolves just from other things over the years for me. Next. And I would often take pictures, you know, wherever I went, whether it was grocery stores, again, work, like lunch breaks, long walks, and it became this kind of, I think it became this release for me in a way, because at the time, or something I've tried to work on over the years, I never really understood how to face my problems head on. I only knew how to walk away from them. And I think the walk away aspect, I learned to, by walking down the streets of my neighborhood, by, taking my camera with me wherever I went. It was a sort of this side part of kind of walking away from the things that, I didn't want to face at the time. And I think living in Florida was one of those things, but I was able to, I think, as I was, realizing over the years that I was sort of stuck here, I began to notice things in a way that I didn't before. And I appreciated the things that I saw, even if I didn't necessarily like what I saw. Next. And, everywhere that I went, I would just bring my camera with me and just take pictures of everyday things. Next. And also around this time, I had my daughter, and she became a huge focus for me with my photography. And I think, whether I realized it or not, graphic design was a huge influence in the way that I approached photography. I don't think I ever would have I would have never said that at the beginning, but especially looking back on it and knowing now that I'm being more aware of it, I was especially drawn to, colors and lines, light, very, geometric patterns and shapes in my work. And I think also at the time at my home was a very flat ranch home. And so there was all these very harsh shadows that would be cast in our backyard. And so, it was a lot of kind of real life, everyday life merging in with some of the things that, had come from my training as a graphic designer. Next. Yeah, this would be, I think, a really good example of that. And I think it goes back to, the idea of my transformation of the perception of my surroundings, and, seeing this otherwise very kind of mundane, concrete pad backyard in a very flat ranch home that needed a lot of repairs, and turning it into something kind of magical, especially with my daughter, and capturing that part of, her childhood as well, and turning it into something different. Next. In a way, I think, as much as I was photographing her, a lot of what I was photographing was myself as well through her. And kind of, the things that I struggled with, or, kind of putting her or putting myself through her in the surroundings of where we lived in this very suburban neighborhood. Next. Yeah, continuing with, being inspired by the very bright colors that surrounded us. And I think in Florida, we're always surrounded by these beautiful, vivid colors, and, exploring those colors of childhood as well. And just, having that background of my graphic design that came through with that. Next. So, the more that I began to photograph her, and the more that I was also continuing to photograph my surroundings, and I began to merge both of these things over time. So it wasn't just about capturing her, it was also about, putting her in that specific place of where we were, and, not just having her with a background, but having the background be significant, and, thinking about how those two things related. Next. So this one, was at a, my friend lived in Sarasota, and it was in the Amish neighborhood in Sarasota of Pinecraft. And so my friend and I took our children to explore that area, to the playground. And so, I'm always thinking about sort of the history of Florida, and, there's just so much to think about, in addition to capturing my daughter's everyday experience. Next. And again, just thinking about, living in Florida and what that means. Next. And there's some more. Next. So around a few years ago, after living on the Space Coast for quite a number of years, I decided to really try and focus on what it meant to live on the Space Coast and taking pictures of that. And so my daughter and I, we would just kind of walk around places, whether it was with friends or on our own. And a lot of these kind of were spontaneous moments. And actually most of them are, I don't necessarily plan, anything. We just come across these places, and, so much of what she has, done in photos is something I could never, predict. So she's very much kind of my muse in these settings. But a big thing about the Space Coast that was so interesting, and to a greater extent Florida, was just how we're kind of left in the backdrop, I guess, of what used to be. And you can't help but notice that you're living in sort of a shadow of all of the things that went on before you. And even though, with everything that's going on now with SpaceX, and there's so much going towards future space travel, especially at that time, just before SpaceX happened, you definitely felt like there's this weird in-between time. And because so much of that area was very run down, and it felt like all these, there's all these sorry, I'm a little lost for words right now. I can usually talk on and on about it, but it like all the rocket launches into space, and the Apollo missions and the SpaceX missions, they're going off to a whole other place that none of us will ever go to in our lifetimes. And so we're left here in this place. And it just, as much as we're connected to all of this history, at the same time, I feel like there's a bit of a separation and an in-between. And so living there, I definitely began to explore that a little bit more, and just in general with Florida, the idea of coming here for escape and fantasy, and that, people came down here for the idea of a tropical paradise, when really what happened was, these vast wastelands of asphalt and concrete were built atop what they believed to be wastelands of sand and scrub. But, nobody ever realized that the natural paradise of Florida was just not a paradise that was ever really intended for us. Next slide. So we were left with just vast wastelands again of empty shopping centers, huge empty shopping centers with huge asphalt parking lots that no one used. Next. And our lives, the lives of my family and I, were sort of all in the middle of this. Next. And when people photograph Florida a lot, it's finding this idealized space, or what, the stereotypical image of Florida with the palm trees and beaches and again, the tropical paradise. But a lot of what we're surrounded by is shopping centers and suburbs and things that, are very mundane and everyday, maybe not beautiful, but we're still living here and existing here. Next. This was from, there was a rocket launch that had sent out a satellite. And, I've tried to get pictures of rocket launches from so many different places. And, always wanting to get really close as I can to the facilities themselves, getting close to the shore to really get the good shot of the launch. But then the more I began to explore, the more I wanted to photograph in, so many different places on the Space Coast that maybe weren't as picturesque, I think, or more accurate to how I saw my surroundings. Next. And again, visiting as many places as I could. This is at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. Next. More very rundown, just aspects of, this feels very personal to me. It was somewhere at, the Sonic on Clear Lake Boulevard in Cocoa, which is, was my home for a very long time. And this was what I saw, but it's not necessarily something that you would always envision when you think of, the Florida that I think is marketed to everybody. Next. And very literally, ghosts of another time. This was in a thrift store window for a long time. I'm not exactly sure what specific mission or purpose they were for, but it definitely had a haunting, kind of funny presence to them when it caught my eye. Next. And, I can't not talk about Florida without hurricanes. And I've thought about capturing, the impact of hurricanes in so many ways. And I went to the Cocoa Beach Pier one day after Irma had hit us. And I saw this, and I, came across this huge just sandbank that had blown in. And if you're familiar with the Cocoa Beach Pier, it's pretty far away. This particular part is fairly far away from the shore. And, just seeing how useless these chairs and everything became. And it just kind of it resonated to me in a way that I think a lot of the other depictions I've tried of hurricanes, it definitely spoke to me. Next. This one is another really deeply personal image. It was right at the end of the street that I lived on in Rockledge, and I would see it every day, anytime that I left. And I call it, it reminds me a lot of The Great Gatsby with the glasses, the billboard with the glasses, and how the guy, he's always looking down on everyone. So the bankruptcy and divorces, it was just always sort of this ever-present ominous sign in this abandoned storefront that it still looks exactly like that. So, it really spoke to this experience, I think, of, that particular suburban decaying neighborhood. Next. Color is always a big thing for me, exploring color in ways that aren't, using really beautiful, vivid colors to explore things that are maybe a little bit less than beautiful, or, just, I think we're so blessed in a way with the colors of Florida, and the way that I think they're depicted, and how, they try to express this kind of happiness and beauty that sometimes doesn't always come across. Next. And, you know, I'm continuing to photograph the Space Coast. I've moved to Orlando now, but I'm always coming back. I never feel like I'm quite done. And it's always an inspiration to me. And I'm, you know, currently putting all these images together for a book. So it's definitely a project that's near and dear to my heart that I'm hoping I can put into a book and get it out. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for this insightful view into your work. I'm going to move immediately to the next speaker, so we have time for questions at the end. Frank Day is a Washington, D.C. based photographer, and he explores the impact of humanity's footprint on the natural world. Many of Frank Day's series are concerned with culture and social history, as in his series on the impact of globalization on African culture and on the erasure of a cultural, political, and personal memory in the rebuilding of the East Berlin in the 90s. His multi-year work on Bangkok at night dealt with obsolescence, the passing of time, and the transient nature of progress as well as itself. Frank Day, who was trained as a painter, says his photography owes more to the history of painting than photography. So Frank today will be speaking about his RV Night, specifically in Florida series, as well as the Bangkok Call Waiting series. Frank, thank you for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Let's start with how I got the inspiration for this series on RVs in Florida. For years, I came down to Florida for a winter avoidance, staying in campgrounds in my luxurious, opulent nylon RV, seen here in the moonlight. I didn't actually shoot very much. I was out with my kayak most of the time. Next. But one night, fateful night, I was sitting around the campfire. I happened to look up and liked the firelight on the tree canopy that you see here. This was the very first image in the Florida series. Next. Well, I wanted to move around the campground and see light up on the trees more, but you know, dragging the campfire around was really impractical. So I went to Walmart, got some flashlights, long ones, short ones, and started taking more pictures. They were pretty decent, but I was limited by the sensor noise of the first Canon 5D. This image is in the collection of the US Embassy in Montenegro, of all places. The bluish light that you see there is from a flashlight with an LED light. The warmer light is tungsten. I started carrying around old batteries because they were even warmer. Next, please. Here's another campground, campfire, not mine. Yeah, my work got more formal, kind of more elegant. I was a little more careful with adding light to the scene. That light up in the tree, it looks like sunset or sunrise, but that's all artificial light. Next. And then this was a sort of a mini sub-series created by holding the flashlight steady on a single point for 30 seconds. Next, please. The look I was going for here references an era of romantic landscape painting in the 19th century, like George Inness, Frederick Church, and Louis Comfort Tiffany, although he was not a painter. Next, please. And here's another look I was looking for, a look of the medieval treatment of foliage. It's a flat, non-directional light, but very clear, super identifiable types of plants that you see on medieval altar panels standing next to the picture of the patron who paid for it. Next. This all in all is a pretty decent series. It was exhibited, it sold some. I liked it, I still like it. One night I was out shooting this particular image here, and I turned around without moving. I just turned around 180 degrees and was looking straight at this next picture. I was completely blown away. It was kind of miraculous in its complete perfection. So that's an airstream there. So I added my own light on the palm fronds in the immediate foreground, and on the ear tree in the background, you can see some moonlight on the upper branches of it. So I shot this and spent the next 4 years trying to find another picture that was quite as good as this. This ended up being on the cover of the book. It was a lucky first break. Next. I kept going back to the same places. This, in fact, is the same tree that was in the last picture. And you see the moon there. The moon is a constant theme throughout this series. So I'm sort of channeling Caspar David Friedrich, the German late 18th century painter who did some famous moonscapes. Next, please. These are not heartwarming pictures of cozy RVs on vacation, not at all. Look at this image out there behind the RV, the aptly named Prowler. There's nothing back there, just ominous blackness, no civilization, no society. It's kind of the ultimate gated community, no community at all. Next, please. They're kind of hiding. These people are in flight from something that has gone wrong out there in the world beyond. You get the sense that some catastrophe has happened. They're secluded in their little personal life support pods. Next. Nothing is more American than an RV. But these photographs are not an optimistic take on where we're headed. This looks like daybreak, but actually it's late at night. All that light is from my Walmart flashlights. Next. It's another example of lurking hidden in the palmettos. Again, that's all artificial light. Next. This particular Airstream with its orange kayak next to it. Next. Whoops, we're missing a shot. Can we go back? Yeah, we're missing a shot. Let's just go ahead. Next. This is one of my faves. It's on the back cover of the book. Look how toxic that sky looks. And in case you're wondering how much manipulation was involved in these images, here is the original shot off the camera. Next. See that there was a car in the lower left corner that we had to take out. There's also a little stub of a post. And this one was actually pretty easy. And some of these, I had to swap out entire trees, foregrounds with big pickup trucks, a lot of work. We actually created sort of an image bank of South Florida vegetation, which we would use to crop out stuff as needed. Next. And this is an installation shot at the Katzen Museum in Washington, D.C. to show you the usual size at which I show these. Those are 11 feet long, so 44 inches by 11 feet. And now for something completely different. Nighttime interiors of phone booths in Bangkok. They're all gone now, of course. They're all, wait, not yet. They're all gone now, replaced by cell phones. The Florida project that we just saw wasn't technically totally easy, but this is a whole different level of technical difficulty. Next. This is one of my faves. It looks like I'm, what, 4 feet away from that phone, but actually it's more like 18 inches or 20 inches. So there were a lot of fancy wide-angle lenses used to shoot this. I'm actually inside the phone booth, and it doesn't smell alpine fresh in there, I gotta tell you. Bangkok is super hot. It's like wet and steamy. This particular image did not come out all that well, so I had to Photoshop in a couple of places where the original wasn't sharp enough. So part of that purple taxi is actually a separate exposure. And oddly enough, that little red milk carton, that was really there, but that's a separate shot of it. Next. The photography was all sort of right at the limit of what was technically possible. There was simply no wiggle room at all on the depth of field, on shutter speed, on ISO. It was all problematic. The deeper question here, what it's all about, is really about loss, about being cast aside and forgotten as progress rolls on. One day you're the shiniest new thing on the block, like payphones, a hot new item in the urban space at one time. And then years go by and people use you to dump their trash. These silent, grimy enclosures speak to isolation, obsolescence, and death. Next. The pictures actually kind of came out too beautiful. I mean, they're kind of lush and lovely. My usual problem, grim topic, but gorgeous result. I need to learn how to ugly it up a little. Next. The orange vertical thing there is a plinth for a phone. The phone has been removed. You can still see there are actually 2 booths here. The one on the right still has its phone. Someone has written a phone number on the side of that booth, if you want to call it and see who's there. That red streak is taillights of a car. And as an example of the technical challenges on this, if you want that particular length and intensity of that red streak, you need a specific shutter speed, and that speed depends exactly on how fast the traffic is moving down that street at that spot. Next. I was in Bangkok off and on for about 6 years working on this, and over time, the work got more abstract and, to my mind, kind of lovelier. This is looking through the very damaged, scratched up glass on a phone booth at a person outside in the lower right. This full frame would be 66 inches high, just sort of a lovely, almost painterly like piece. Next. I saw this on the way to the dentist one night, also very painterly. Next. And here's another person seen through the glass. You can see a pink sweater, her dark hair, and then a hand sticking out to the right. So there are people in this series, but they're all abstracted and depersonalized. They're just sort of stand-ins for real people. They're, let's see, next. I like to shoot triptychs, but they were hard to find. You know, all 3 shots have to work, and they have to work together. And they're brutal in post-production, getting things to line up right, get the sizes equalized. For a while, I had a Thai assistant. That's him in the middle of a rainstorm with a plastic rain cover on, holding a yellow umbrella on the right there. Again, you see a brake light streak on the left, and then there's a bus passing by on the right. Next. This is a fave. This is on Sukhumvit Boulevard. Again, a lot of post in this image to get the things in the background to line up properly and to get the streaks to continue from one panel to another. I like the sort of dreamlike quality that this has. It doesn't reference ordinary three-dimensional space all that much. Next. And this is probably my favorite single piece from the Bangkok project. It's 2 phone booths in the flower market. It's actually the last phone booth before you leave the flower market. It's gone now. Both of those are gone. And you can see that as phone booths become disused, that people just start using them as little miniature warehouses. Some florists have stuck their excess material in there. It's kind of a lovely, lovely shot. I like that blue and the green. And we have a detail of that next. There, you can see that someone has taken their finger and written a phone number on the dirt on the glass. That's sort of an upper center section there. When I had my opening in Bangkok of this work, one wise guy in the audience, one of the attendees pulled out his cell phone and called that number just to see if it worked. And it did. Next. This is an installation shot of that same work, so you can see the scale of it. In fact, that last one we saw is to the left behind that woman. You can see 2 of the 3 panels. And on the right are the end panels of a 28-foot long panorama, all shot inside a single phone booth. I think it was six panels, all consecutive. And thanks for watching. That is it. Thanks much.
Thank you, Frank, for this absolutely fascinating presentation. Just wonderful work. I'm going to talk about Matt Roberts. Matt will be speaking about 2 series as well. He has Deadland and Florida Dreams series. Both of those series are Florida-based. So Deadland is the moniker of a small Florida town where he lives, which is DeLand. Taken at night, these photographs document abandoned businesses found throughout the Florida landscape, places once part of our daily routines, now empty shells of desire. These abandoned buildings surrounded by black stand as ghost of progress, the remnant of capitalism. And Florida Dreams is a photographic project that documents ubiquitous, I'm sorry about my accent, but ubiquitous, please help me with this word.
Ubiquitous, yes.
Thank you. Hand-painted murals found in the state of Florida, realized as a set of postcards and prints. This series examines these idealized and grandiose representations of Florida lifestyle and nature. Preposterous, endearing, romanticized, discordant, unrealistic, absurd, sexist, disturbing, fascinating, beautiful, and hilarious. Florida Dreams. Thank you, Matt. And please tell us about your projects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Patrick. I'd like to thank you and Holly for putting this together and curating this show and doing everything you do at Snap. And just say what a great pleasure it is to be included with Lauren, Steven, and Frank in the show. And I want to thank Alexis for clicking through the slides as well. So yeah, so I will just talk about these 2 projects briefly. And this is my first project called Deadland, which in the description is I live in DeLand, which is a small town and here in Central Florida. And a lot of people refer to it as Deadland. And because it's kind of a small, boring town. And you also find throughout the Florida landscape, I've always been fascinated by all of these abandoned buildings. So as Lauren was saying, like, Florida is kind of covered by all these empty parking lots, abandoned strip malls, spaces that were once part of our, great desires and dreams are now kind of abandoned and waiting to be turned into something else, or maybe they never do, So I've always been really fascinated by those moving as I, move around in the landscape here. So this first one is taken in New Smyrna Beach. It's kind of an iconic building that is now kind of in waiting for, someone to do something with it. And it's all boarded up. It's an old liquor store and it has that kind of really unique shape. And I thought I would talk kind of briefly about how a lot of people ask me about the process. So Alexis, maybe we can go to the next one, please. So usually what I do is I photograph these buildings at night. I do a lot of, driving around wherever I'm going, always trying to mark these buildings during the daytime. So I have, I keep on my phone a Google map of pins everywhere. And this one is on 17, outside of DeLand, in between DeLand and Palatka. And an old convenience store. And so I photograph it at night. And then I will, kind of start editing it, converting it to black and white, kind of getting to a look that I like. And then if we go to the next one, please. And then using Photoshop, I then will mask out the surrounding. When I first started doing the series, I was photographing them without doing the masking. And I'm not quite sure why I started doing this, but I really liked this idea of isolating the building. And a lot of times they're surrounded by other things. These may not pay attention to these buildings as much because of their surroundings, but I think once you isolate them and put them in black, they kind of become this otherly object that I really was fascinated by. And so that's kind of my process. So this one is in De Leon Springs, just a little bit north of where I live. I love the Joy grocery store that has been abandoned for quite some time now in this little small town. Again, photograph at night, long exposure photography. Usually kind of travel around, find these places and, set up my gear and just, make multiple shots until I finally get a shot that I like. So maybe we can go to the next one, please. Yes. So this is a Kmart in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm actually from Florida. I think maybe I'm the only artist here that's Florida native. So I've lived in Florida almost my whole life. And as everyone else is, I'm well aware of its oddities and strangeness. And it has been a very strange place to live. But this Kmart is actually the Kmart that was very close to my house as I was a kid. And this was, to me, was always some place of, you would go, very exciting place to go. It's a great, embodies all these great desires of things that we can have and do. And, I could go there to get the latest toy or, whatever it was that I was into at the moment. And it was, a place that all of us went to. And, and now it has been abandoned for quite some time. And when I was there, because a lot of times I do these long exposures, I'm very vulnerable because you're just sitting there with your camera and people will just come, if there's someone around, they just come and start talking to you, ask you what you're doing. So I was talking to a gentleman that was going to a internet lottery place. So now around this area, there's a lot of internet lottery type places, gambling places. And so we got in a conversation, we're talking, and he was telling me about all these places that, all the way that this place is used now. And apparently this place gets used for like drone racing and, like car clubs just meet there. And people are improvising with this space that has been abandoned for quite some time. But it's always a fascinating space to me because I was really grateful to get this picture because this is a place to me as a child that was so important and now is just abandoned and kind of forgotten. This is a Dairy Queen near, I still have family that lives in that area, in the Jacksonville area, was where I grew up. And this is a Dairy Queen, abandoned Dairy Queen. I think my very early girlfriends worked at this Dairy Queen. Can we go to the next one, please? This one is in Orlando, Fairbanks. This is in Sanford. And this one also was in Sanford as well. And a more difficult one to kind of try kind of mask out the tree and everything, but I kind of really super happy with the way this looked. Can we go to the next one, please? And this one, there's a lot of abandoned, I have a lot of photographs of abandoned convenience stores because they are everywhere. And I love these shapes because they always remind me of kind of a Mies van der Rohe, like kind of like a bastardization of a Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth house. That is this, very spectacular example of modernism. And I always kind of think about this project as, it reminds me of the promises of modernism and everything that comes along with it. This kind of lifestyle and utopia that kind of comes with modernism that we never quite meet. It has, of course, like everything has a lot of problems. And now we're kind of seeing these ghosts of these problems kind of around us. So I love these. I'm really fascinated by all these convenience stores. And as I said, I just can't help but think of something wonderful like the Farnsworth house, of Mies van der Rohe's architecture. So that is those are the prints that are that you can see at the show. There's a lot more to the series. I've been doing the series for a couple of years and obsessively just driving around and photographing these buildings. And another thing that I've been working on has some similarities is Florida Dreams. So anyone who's from Florida will know that you see these hand-drawn murals everywhere that depict Florida lifestyle. And, I'm kind of endeared by these, also kind of, they're can be hilarious sometimes and, super kitsch and everything like that. But I'm really interested in this idea of how people represent the idealized Florida lifestyle. So this is just a little bait shop in New Smyrna Beach, which I spend a lot of time at. And I've always just been endeared by this building and this painting that's on this little bait shop. Can we get the next one, please? So this one is Daytona Beach. And one of the things that always fascinates me about these is, we put these idealized versions of nature and we end up, we put them as murals on buildings that we have to, of course, clear out, destroy nature to have these buildings so we can depict our idealized version of nature. So I like that kind of layering. So I like to do things like also not only include the mural, but include the architecture that it's in or on. And also I'll always try to leave some kind of things that I think kind of are humorous, like the plastic bucket, the donation box, other things that go along with them. Go to the next one, please. This is in Daytona Beach, a cozy villa, which is on US 1. So that area was once this, major thoroughfare of Florida, and now it's kind of been abandoned. So there's always old hotels, and some of them have these amazing murals on them. I wouldn't think that was a cozy villa if you went there. It's but it has a great mural there as well. Of course, we have this, Florida's known for the motorcycling and bike week and all of this crazy, ideas, and very sexist picture here of this woman leaning over the motorcycle, which we see kind of those kind of depictions a lot in murals in Florida. Can we go to the next one, please? This one's in New Smyrna Beach, and depicts that kind of idealized lifestyle, right? Surfer living as surfing on the beach, right, and living that idealized Florida lifestyle. Yeah, and this one is in Flagler Beach, and we just go to the next one, please. This one's in Daytona. I love the the mermaid theme is a big one for landscapes or murals in Florida, and this one is particularly wonderful in a way. And underneath an overpass and in Daytona. Yeah, we go to the next one. This one's in Green Cove Springs, in a small convenience store, and yeah, just a really wonderful, strange one. Yeah, and this one is on the West Coast. Forgot exactly where, below Tampa. Crystal River, where you encounter manatees, and a really wonderful mural as well. This one is in Cedar Key, which was this is a trailer, this was an advertisement for an RV park. And this was a small trailer that is now just permanently parked there with this mural on it. And I believe that's it. Is that correct? Yes. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Matt, for this very lovely and whimsical presentation of your work. Very interesting. And we are now going to go to Steven Benson. Steven, welcome. And, we are a little bit behind schedule. I hope everybody is going to stay for the Q&A at the end. Steven's work is the transformation of the highway of the I-4. So the photographs are representative of the long-term project that reflect an ongoing interest in the idea of transformation. For the past 6 years, Steven has been creating images that explore the activities and artifacts associated with the process of transforming the landscape by an enormous infrastructure project, the I-4 highway reconstruction, which is running through Central Florida. Steven is reminded of Margaret Bourke-White's quote when she said, "Industrial forms were all the more beautiful because they were never designed to be beautiful. Industry has evolved an unconscious beauty, often a hidden beauty that was waiting to be discovered." So with that, Steven, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for putting the exhibition together. It's been really a great experience getting to know and see the other photographers' work as well. You could go to the first image. That is the photograph that's behind me, by the way. It's a hand-colored black and white print. All three images photographed with large format and then printed in the darkroom on the same sheet of mural paper. It was really important to me at the time that all three of these images were actually connected physically on the same piece of paper because I'm looking at the idea of compressing time and space. This one was done in 1993, so we're really talking about 30 years ago. But the important thing about this is in two ways. One is, if you notice the subject matter, they all involve interaction with the landscape in some way. The one in the center is the building of a gas station. The covered bushes are from a landscape area around a new construction of an apartment building, and the one on the right is actually from a highway that was being built. Next. So a big part of what I was looking at with the other series of images, I did about 20 of those 8-foot hand-colored photographs. So scale was an issue, but I was also looking at how we perceive time and space and the way that that affects the kind of decisions that we make as individuals and as cultures. This is the beginning of a couple series of photographs that I'll show you quickly that are about the Three Gorges Dam in China. So I was in China in 1996 doing some things. And that was when I first heard about the Three Gorges Dam. But the fact that 2 million people were being forced to move, that it's going to flood 400 miles of the Yangtze River Valley, all really kind of struck home to me. So I made plans to go to do these photographs. You can show the next one. This is a tributary to the Yangtze River. So I traveled the 400 miles and photographed along the way, but in this particular instance, it had to do with the people more than a lot of other things, because 2 million people were being forced to relocate from the area as a result of the reservoir that was going to be filled. Next. So this is what the construction site looked like at the time. Just as a side note, it was guarded by Chinese soldiers with machine guns. And my assistant and myself snuck in 5 days in a row. And the police showed up at our hotel, but that's another story. Next. So I started looking at this construction that was going on. I moved to Florida almost 15 years ago to take a teaching position with the School of Photography at Daytona State College. So I'm making this drive between Orlando, where I live, and Daytona, where I teach, and experience the same thing that everybody else does, with the kind of frustration and concerns about traffic patterns changing all the time and things like that. Next. So it was also the scale of this particular project that drew my attention. I'm legally not supposed to do any of these things. But then I remind my students that I'm the same photographer that snuck into the Three Gorges Dam five days in a row, getting around Chinese soldiers. So this is not that big of a deal, but still I'm being very careful, very cautious. Next. Next. This is one of the images that's in the exhibition currently on view at Snap Downtown. And one of the things that I found really fascinating is going to areas of the construction sites where people really aren't supposed to see. So if you look at the next one, that overhead view that we saw previously is casting a shadow a few years later on this pile of dirt. So one of the things that fascinates me, and Patrick mentioned Margaret Burke White, is that idea of finding beauty in the most unusual kinds of places. This is really the opposite of what I would think of if I think of something beautiful in a certain sense, the construction of a highway. So I'm trying to take dirt and rebar and concrete and make it very seductive and engaging. Next. Next one. You can keep going. Sometimes there are these moments. You can stay on this one. That's fine. I'm looking at all of the different areas that are part of and involved in the construction of the highways, so that sources for aggregate material for road building and various kinds of substrates for the concrete. And I actually don't know anything about this process. I know all of these key words, so don't mistake me for being an engineer. Next. Where we're not supposed to go, inside a drain segment. Who knew that inside of a drain segment could be so seductive? Next. A kind of site-specific sculpture or land art that people have left behind. Sometimes I'm reminded of Stonehenge and other kinds of forms that we see on the land. Next. someone apparently ran into a fire hydrant. And this is the result. Kind of miraculous to have been there, but I find it interesting that people often talk about being in the right place at the right time. And I've sort of learned through this process that it's actually being in the right place long enough for the right time to find you. Next. Also discovering a lot about living as a homeless person in Orlando. This was one of the hidden away areas that really took quite a lot of doing to happen to run across. Obviously, I didn't know it was there. So there's always this sense of discovery. You know, what am I going to see if I go to this next area? You don't know. It's one of the things that I share with students quite a bit, is you really have to explore. What you see from one position is not necessarily the end of the story. So light reflecting off of a building across the street. I watched this driving to school from Orlando to Daytona for quite a while and figured out what time I needed to be there to pull off to the side of the highway to get the shot. Next. Putting the camera into an area where actually physically I could not go was also kind of an interesting territory, because I can, as many of us can on the back of our cameras, make an adjustment to the screen so we can see what the camera sees without looking through the camera directly. So I've been taking advantage of that characteristic quite a bit. Next. Gravel pit. Next. Water hoses with a fire in the background. Inside a drain pipe. It's all very exciting adventure. Go ahead. The way that vertical line visually separates this space. I had some people comment when I posted this on Instagram that it made their head hurt. And I thought that was kind of an interesting response. Next. Someone sent me a note. They thought they were looking at the inside of a cathedral. And I thought that's really amazing, because, you know, the people that designed this drain pipe weren't thinking about how visually interesting it's going to be. It probably never entered their minds. Next one. Conduit coming out of the ground. This is a support for a street light in the process of being built. There's just a few more, I think. Go ahead. Yeah. Underneath the bridge. And I think the last one is next, that I photographed last Sunday. So usually during the week, I'm doing what I call reconnaissance, where I'm looking to see what's going on in different places. And this was one of the stops that I made last Sunday. I'm going out tomorrow. I think I'm going to be photographing in the rain. We'll see what happens. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Steven. This is an ongoing process, as we all know. I don't know how long this project is going to go for. Are we talking about another couple of years, you think?
No, it might be another 6 months to a year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a publisher.
Yeah, I mean, what we are able to present today, as far as all photographers, is a very slim portion of their body of work. And I appreciate you all were able to share that with us. So with that said, Alexis, let's start with questions coming from the chat.
Yes, so thank you all for those beautiful presentations. We have a lot of comments, like such interesting photos, Frank. Scale was incredible. Let's see. Tina asked Frank, she says that you guys met a few years ago at Portfolio Reviews and just wanted to thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of comments. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask the artists? while we have a couple more minutes?
Also, artists feel free to interact and ask each other questions. It's interesting how Matt's last picture was kind of correlated with Frank's series of the RVs. You know, it's like it was a very interesting connection. Matt, it's very interesting what you did. If you don't mind me asking this question, because the two series that you're presenting, one is extremely, I would say, you know, somber or dark, and the other one is extremely colorful. Do you see them being opposites, or do you see them kind of the same?
Oh yeah, they definitely are interrelated. And I actually did a show that just came down recently where we did the first half of the show with the Deadland series. And then halfway through, we switched everything out and put up the Florida Dream series. And it totally, like, the first was very somber, kind of, you know, dark. And then the second series, putting that more colorful work in, totally changed the mood of the room. So yeah, I mean, aesthetically, in some ways, I see that they're very like related in the way that I work, you know, and of course, they're related to this idea of this kind of Floridian topics, and so I do see them somewhat related in that way. But and again, of course, they also have very different kind of
yeah
outcomes.
I mean, it's almost like what Lauren was saying also. There's this very bright, colorful, appealing, and, you know, as you said, maybe quirky depiction of Florida, but then there's this underlying dark, isolated, you know,
somewhat problematic. Yeah.
and,
yeah, I was
and
finding
so,
a lot of things that Lauren was saying about how she's seen the landscape. And, you know, it's interesting that we're seeing the same things, interpreting it slightly different ways and slightly different outcomes. Yeah.
Right. And Frank as well, because with this RV series, we're talking about, you know, having a habitat that is totally isolated and sad to a certain extent, right, Frank? Is that the way you saw
I
this?
saw them as life support pods that looked like they'd been dropped by an alien ship. Not necessarily a very tasteful alien ship, but you know, dropped nonetheless. You know, I should add that in all those pictures, it looks like these RVs are out there completely by themselves. In no case was that true. So there was a lot of Photoshop work to get rid of all hints, other lights, signs, cars, other RVs. You know, Photoshop has this new subroutine called RV away. You click on it and it removes RVs in the background of the picture. So yeah, I use that a lot.
Okay, so you created your own vision about it. You wanted to transmit a message of isolation.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's called the Ricky Bobby feature.
Say again?
The Ricky Bobby feature, that Photoshop feature, I think that's what they call it.
So
question.
yeah, go ahead.
We wanted to know, how do each of the artists feel like being Florida native versus non-native has influenced their work? So I guess if you guys maybe want to answer in order, Lauren, if you wanted to go first, coming into Florida.
Yeah. So like for me, Florida was always somewhere that I visited as a child because I had family. So my interpretation of Florida was, I guess, never like the Disney World beaches thing. It was all because I had a grandmother in Palatka. So that was always my idea of Florida. And I guess, you know, from someone who is non-native, I had definitely been very familiar with, I think, with the perception of Florida, and coming here, it started to become kind of the way that you feel about family, where it's like, yeah, some of that might be true, but it's, you know, this is my home. So like, you're not allowed to say that. So I think there's the perception, I think, that we see from the outside, there's still some truth to that, but I think it becomes so much deeper and more profound living here and more nuanced.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Frank, did you want to add anything to that of how you feel?
Well, I kind of love Florida, particularly Southwest Florida. So to me, I have a slightly romanticized notion of it, although, I'm not totally blind. So I love going there. I love the atmosphere, particularly when it's winter here and not so winter there.
Yeah, in between.
Yeah, and while I was doing this RV thing, I also shot several other series on Florida that we haven't talked about, but they're more similar to Matt's. They're stuff painted on things and weird colors and shapes and juxtapositions. It's visually endlessly fascinating.
And Matt is Floridian, so
Yeah, I grew up in Jacksonville.
Right.
Yeah, I feel very Floridian. I went to very southern Florida. They say, the farther north you are, the more south you are. So, I was fortunate enough to do grad school, in Chicago, and as I became an adult, started to be able to travel and I could see Florida from the outside. But even as a teenager, I knew Florida was quite a strange place to grow up. Yeah, but like everybody else, I love, I live the Florida lifestyle. I love, I go surfing all the time, spend a lot of time at the beach. But I also see all the problems that it has, and can try to see it as an outsider as well. So yeah, it's like I know how to navigate through this strange place that I live in, and have a lot of love for it, but also see a lot of its problems.
Yeah, and Steven, you're from the Midwest originally, so
I grew up and lived most of my life in Michigan.
Yeah.
And curiously enough, I used to go on photo journeys to Florida to photograph because I've always just thought it's such a surreal place. I just loved being here to work. So when the opportunity came to teach here, I just jumped on it and been loving it, absolutely loving it.
Also, I wanted to mention I really appreciate that some of you have shown your process, the before and after. That was really very interesting to see. Frank, how you liked your background and really giving it a surreal, painterly feel. On both of your series, you can see your background as a painter for sure.
Having started as a painter really influences everything you do.
Yeah.
In the darkroom and in Photoshop.
Yeah.
It makes you better at it.
If anybody has a chance to see Frank's other body of work, some of his body of work, the ship.
Ship hulls.
Yeah, those are complete abstract paintings. They're absolutely wonderful. So there's a chance to discover that. Also, Frank, I saw that one day you posted some of your drawings and paintings, and they're quite spectacular. So I'm glad that you still keep that practice.
Can we plug our websites?
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of this conversation, everybody should make sure that they say where their website is.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to type it in the chat. All of the artists, if you guys want.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, just explore more of the body of work. Again, because of the time limit and because we have 4 artists together, we cannot really go in extra depth about each person's practices, but I hope that you get like a good sense of their sensibility.
I did have a question. Lauren, did you mention when your book is coming out?
No, it is still at the beginning.
Right.
But hopefully, I'm hoping to take this year to really focus on it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because as a Florida native myself, I relate to how, all of you guys interpret Florida, because we have I've always thought these beautiful palm trees in a straight line, but we had to tear down all of the beautiful vegetation in order to get to that. So I just love how you each focused on a different aspect and interpretation of that idea. And it's still Florida, and we're making the best of it. And you know, it's still beautiful how you guys show it too. So it's still beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's 4 outstanding perspectives, very original and very, very unique for sure. We are 20 minutes after our schedule, but we are totally fine. I hope that you all are still excited and interested. So if we have any more questions, let's go for it. Otherwise,
Well, we're all being paid by the hour, right? So let's keep going.
By the minute, Frank, by the minute. So don't worry. By increments. So any other questions, Alexis, that you see or not?
I don't think, Tina just wanted to know if there's any installation shots since we didn't show any in the presentation, so we can show those on our social media and things like that.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
You can find them there. And also the artists are tagged on our social media as well at Snap Orlando. So if you wanted to find their social media that way too.
So one more thing, obviously the exhibition was up since February, October 11th. We have one more week to see the exhibition. So anybody who is here in Orlando, please go and see it in person. The images online are one thing. The images in person is really something that we want to see. You definitely have more of an experience. We are open every day from 11 to 6 except Sunday. And as I said, we'll be up until January 22nd. So with that said, I want to thank everybody here for their amazing presentation. That was absolutely insightful and really fascinating. And wishing everybody a wonderful Florida day. And we are going to enjoy the Saturday. So
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Thanks, Alexis.
thank you, everyone.